Every night my son wanted me to do that for him. And I did, until the night my body gave out. It was always easier to just do it than to hear him complain. That's what mothers do in Cleveland, right? At least that's what mothers like me did. I'm Susan Miller, 68 years old, and I'm about to tell you the kind of story most women take to their graves. If you're new here, subscribe now, because this story will leave you speechless. I spent most of my life working at Midwest Industrial Laundry on the east side of Cleveland. You know the type: giant washing machines handling sheets from hospitals, uniforms from factories. Place smelled like bleach and sweat. My hands were always red and cracked, no matter how much of that Cornhuskers lotion I slathered on. But that job put food on our table for over 40 years, so I never complained. Not out loud, anyway. I had my son David when I was 19. His father was a forklift operator at the steel plant. By the time I was showing, he'd transferred to Pittsburgh. Never even called to check if the baby was born. Just another deadbeat dad in a neighborhood full of them. Nothing special about my story there. The women in my family don't get fairy tales. We get calluses and varicose veins and the weight of carrying everything by ourselves. From day one, it was just me and David against the world. Our little two-bedroom house wasn't much, but I kept it clean. Worked doubles, sometimes triples during holiday seasons when the hospitals needed extra linens. The daycare lady, Mrs. Kowalski, would keep David late for an extra $5. Poor thing, she'd say about him, not me. Nobody ever said poor thing about the mothers. We were just doing what we had to do. When David was little, he'd wait up for me. I can still see him in those flannel PJs with the trucks on them, sitting by the window. No matter how tired I was, I'd make his favorite, grilled cheese with the crusts cut off, even at 11 p.m. "You're the best mom ever," he'd say, and for a minute, all that exhaustion would lift. Funny how a few words from your kid can make years of sacrifice seem worth it. Or maybe that's just the lie we mothers tell ourselves so we can get up the next day and do it all over again. I never remarried. Had a boyfriend named Rick for a while when David was in middle school. He drove truck for Pepsi and had kind eyes. But David would throw a fit whenever Rick came around. Would slam doors, refuse to eat dinner if Rick was at the table. "It's just you and me, Mom. We don't need nobody else," he'd say. And fool that I was, I believed him. Let Rick go. Let anyone go who might have taken even a speck of attention away from my boy. David was smart, could have gone to college if he'd applied himself. His teachers always said he had potential, but somewhere along the way, potential turned into expectations. His expectations of what I should do for him. By high school, he'd stopped doing his own laundry, stopped making his own lunch. "Mom, that's your job," he'd say, like I was stupid for even suggesting otherwise. And I let him think that way. My fault, I suppose. When you spend years being someone's everything, you forget to teach them how to do without you. The neighborhood changed over the years. The good jobs left first, then the good people. Factories closed, corner stores got replaced with those check-cashing places. My street went from tidy houses with American flags to boarded windows and dealers on the corner. I kept my head down, kept going to work. What else could I do? Moving wasn't an option on laundry wages. David never left home. Not for college, not for a job, not for a girl. "The economy's tough, Mom," he'd say, like he was the only one facing hard times. Meanwhile, I was getting older, slower. The arthritis started in my fingers first, all those years sorting wet linens in cold water. Then my knees went, then my back. The doctor at the free clinic gave me pills that made me fuzzy and didn't do much for the pain. Still, I kept working, kept cooking David separate meals because he didn't like whatever was easiest for me to make, kept cleaning up after him, this grown man who'd never learned to pick up a sock. "You're just better at it, Mom," he'd say with that smile that used to melt my heart but had started to scrape against something raw inside me. Since he was little, he thought I was the whole world. And the world couldn't fail, couldn't get tired, couldn't break down. Even as I started using the wall to help me walk to the bathroom at night, he didn't notice, or didn't want to. When I'd wince lifting his laundry basket, he'd just say, "Getting old is rough, huh?" like it was some kind of joke, never once offered to carry it himself. I don't know when I realized that I'd raised a man who couldn't see me as a person. Maybe it was the night I found him going through my purse for pain pills. Maybe it was when he yelled at me for buying the wrong brand of cereal, like I'd committed some terrible crime. Or maybe it was when I started fantasizing about what it would be like to live alone, to only have to take care of myself for once. Terrible thoughts for a mother to have, ain't they? But there they were, getting louder each day. The thing about being needed is that it can feel like love when you're young enough and strong enough to provide. But as your body starts to fail, that need turns into something else, something that eats you alive from the inside out. I was disappearing one favor at a time, one "Mom, do it for me" at a time. And he never even noticed. I started working at Midwest Industrial Laundry when I was just 14 years old. Summer job that turned into my whole life. Back then, they didn't care much about child labor laws in our part of Cleveland. If you could lift the sheets, you could have the job. My own mama worked there too, until the chemicals ruined her lungs. "Susan," she told me on her deathbed, "find something better." But there wasn't anything better for women like us. Not with just a high school diploma and no connections. The laundry was hot as hell in summer, cold as ice in winter. We processed linens from 3 hospitals and about a dozen hotels. Mountains of other people's messes. Blood, vomit, God knows what on those sheets. We sorted them with our bare hands before the big industrial washers. No gloves back then, they said it slowed us down. My hands were already rough by the time I turned 16. Never did have pretty hands like the girls in magazines. I met David's father on my 18th birthday. Tom worked at Republic Steel, made good money, took me to Red Lobster for our first date, fanciest place I'd ever been. He had this leather jacket and a Camaro. I thought he hung the moon. We dated for about 6 months before I got pregnant. Told him the news in his car outside the mill. He didn't say much, just nodded and said he'd figure something out. 2 weeks later, I heard he'd transferred to Pittsburgh. Left me a note saying he wasn't ready, like I was. When my belly started showing, my supervisor at the laundry moved me to folding instead of sorting. Small mercy. I worked right up until my water broke in the break room. Juanita from Sheets drove me to the hospital in her rusty Buick. David came into this world after 16 hours of labor. 7 pounds, 9 ounces of screaming, red-faced baby boy. The nurse placed him on my chest and said, "Congratulations." I was terrified, exhausted, and completely alone. Mama helped some after David was born. Watched him when I went back to work after 6 weeks, couldn't afford more time off. She'd rock him and sing those old country songs she grew up with in Kentucky. But then, her breathing got worse. The doctors called it occupational lung disease. I called it what it was. The laundry killed her, same as it was slowly killing all of us. She died when David was 3. After that, it was just babysitters and neighbors and a patchwork of help when I could get it. I lived paycheck to paycheck in a small house on East 76th Street. Nothing fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom with tiles falling off the walls. But it was ours, or it would be after 30 years of mortgage payments. I planted marigolds out front every spring, little splash of color in a neighborhood that was starting to fade as the factories shut down one by one. David was a beautiful child. Had these big brown eyes that could melt your heart. But Lord, was he demanding. Cried if I put him down even for a minute. The daycare lady said she'd never seen a child so attached to his mama. "He screams bloody murder when you leave," she'd tell me. Made me feel special and trapped all at once. I'd come home bone-tired from sorting other people's dirty laundry all day, and still had to be everything to this little person who needed me like air. When he started school, I thought things might get easier. They didn't. David struggled with reading, had trouble sitting still. Teachers called me in, suggested he might need special help. But special help cost special money, and I was barely keeping our heads above water. I'd sit with him every night at our chipped formica kitchen table, trying to help with homework I barely understood myself. Sometimes ending in tears, his or mine, depending on the night. The other mothers at school functions would look at me with that mixture of pity and judgment single moms always get. I didn't fit in with my uniforms from Kmart and hands that looked 20 years older than the rest of me. Their husbands coached Little League and built science fair projects. David had me, just me, and it was never enough. He started acting out around 5th grade, getting in fights, talking back to teachers. The school counselor said he had anger issues and suggested therapy. I picked up weekend shifts to pay for 6 sessions before the insurance stopped covering it. The therapist, young guy with a beard, told me David was processing abandonment trauma. Fancy words for what I already knew. His daddy leaving had left a hole nothing could fill, especially not a mother who was already stretched too thin. By middle school, David had developed this habit of making me prove my love. He'd ask for expensive sneakers I couldn't afford, then act like I didn't care about him when I said no. He'd compare me to his friends' mothers who didn't work or who had husbands with good jobs. "Jimmy's mom always bakes cookies for his class," he'd say. Or, "Kyle's dad bought him the new Nintendo," like I wasn't killing myself already trying to keep food on the table. I don't want you thinking David was all bad. He wasn't. He could be sweet when he wanted to. Would pick me dandelions from the yard, draw me pictures at school. "I love you to the moon and back," he'd say, words from some children's book they read at school. And I'd melt, forget all the hard parts. That's the trap of motherhood, I think. The good moments make you forget how the rest of it is slowly grinding you down to dust. When he hit high school, things got worse. He fell in with a rough crowd, boys whose fathers were in jail or gone like his. Started coming home late. I'd wait up, sick with worry, while my alarm was set for 4:30 a.m. for my shift. Found cigarettes in his jacket once. Another time, a half-empty bottle of cheap vodka under his bed. We'd fight, he'd promise to do better, and the cycle would start again. I couldn't control him anymore. He was bigger than me by then, with a man's voice and a child's self-control. The neighbors would hear our fights, see him storming out, slamming doors. "Just a phase," they'd say, those who still bothered to talk to me. "Boys will be boys." Like that explained or excused anything. Through it all, I kept working those double shifts, kept the bills paid somehow. My supervisor, Mike, would look the other way when I'd fall asleep on my break, head on the table in the break room. "You're killing yourself, Susan," he said once. I just shrugged. What choice did I have? I never dated after Rick left. Didn't have the energy or the time. And truth be told, I was scared to bring another man around David. Scared of how he'd react, scared of having to choose. My friends from work, the few I had, stopped inviting me places. I always said no anyway. My world shrank down to work, home, and the constant worry about what trouble David was getting himself into next. Looking back, I can see how I taught him to need me, how I never made him stand on his own 2 feet, how I thought love meant doing everything for him, when maybe real love would have meant teaching him to do for himself. But it's hard to see clearly when you're in the thick of it, just trying to survive each day. David was a complicated boy from the start. Born with his daddy's good looks and his mama's stubborn streak. That's a dangerous combination in a child who never heard the word no stick. Since he was little, he thought I was the whole world. And the world couldn't fail, couldn't get tired, couldn't have needs of its own. I remember when he was about 7, he got invited to Jimmy Kolchak's birthday party. Jimmy lived in the nicer part of the neighborhood, where the dads still had union jobs and the moms drove station wagons instead of taking the bus. I spent 2 weeks' lunch money on a Transformers toy for Jimmy because David said that's what all the boys were getting him. Wrapped it in the Sunday comics because I couldn't afford real wrapping paper. When I picked David up after the party, he wouldn't speak to me the whole walk home. Finally got it out of him. All the other presents had been wrapped in real paper with ribbons. He was embarrassed of the comic strips. "Why can't we be normal, Mom?" he asked, like I wasn't trying my hardest to give him normal. That was David, always looking at what everyone else had, never seeing what was right in front of him, never seeing me breaking my back to keep him fed, clothed, housed. All he saw was what was missing. By the time he hit high school, David had this way about him. Could charm anyone when he wanted to. His teachers, neighbor ladies, even Mr. Grisham at the corner store who'd let him have candy on credit when I was between paychecks. David would turn on this smile. Got that from his daddy too. And people would just melt. Such a nice young man, they'd say to me. If they only knew how he talked to me when no one was around. How he'd roll his eyes and call me stupid when I couldn't help with his algebra homework. How he'd compare me to his friends' moms who didn't have to work double shifts and actually had time to go to school functions. "Mom, why can't you just once be like normal moms?" he'd ask. Like being a single mother working at an industrial laundry was some choice I'd made. Like I wouldn't have given anything for a different life for both of us. The truth is, David grew up thinking the world owed him something, that I owed him everything. And maybe that was my fault. Maybe in trying to make up for his father not being there, I taught him that love means someone else always putting you first, someone else always doing for you. I didn't know how to be both soft and firm, didn't know how to love him without losing myself completely in the process. He wasn't all bad. I need to make that clear. There were moments, fewer as he got older, but still there, when I'd see flashes of the sweet boy he could have been. Like the time when I had that real bad flu, must have been winter of '92. Fever of 103, couldn't get out of bed. David was 16. He made me Campbell's chicken noodle soup, brought it on a tray with saltines arranged in a smiley face. "Got you covered, Mom," he said. For 2 days, he actually took care of me. Then, on the third day, when I was still weak but back on my feet, he asked to borrow $50 for new basketball shoes. Right back to normal, just like that. I don't want to paint him as some kind of monster. He wasn't. He was a boy raised by a tired woman who didn't know how to set boundaries, who thought giving everything was the same as giving love. He learned what I taught him, that his needs came first, last, and always. That no was just a temporary obstacle to getting what he wanted. That women, especially mothers, existed to serve. By the time David finished high school, barely with a D average, I was 41 years old and already feeling like 60. My hands were permanently swollen from arthritis, my back always aching from lifting those heavy wet sheets at work. The laundry had upgraded some equipment, but the job was still backbreaking. Some days I'd come home and have to lay on the floor because the couch was too soft for my screaming spine. Did David notice? Did he offer to help around the house, maybe cook dinner once in a while, pick up his own dirty socks that always somehow ended up next to, never in, the hamper? No. That's not the boy I raised. Instead, he'd be waiting for me, usually hungry, usually with some complaint about how we were out of his favorite cereal or how the internet was too slow. Always something I needed to fix, to provide, to take care of. David tried community college for 1 semester, failed every class except gym. Said the teachers had it out for him. After that, he bounced from job to job. Busboy at Denny's, stocking shelves at Mark's discount store, loading trucks at UPS. That one lasted almost 6 months before he got fired for constant tardiness. Never his fault, of course. Always the boss was unfair, or the schedule was too demanding, or the pay wasn't worth the effort. Through it all, he lived at home, in that same bedroom with the baseball wallpaper I'd put up when he was 10. Rent-free, bill-free, responsibility-free. "I'm saving up," he'd say when I'd gently suggest maybe it was time to find his own place. Saving for what, I never knew. His paycheck, when he had one, went to his car, his phone, his nights out with friends, beer money, girl money, everything but growing up money. The worst part was, he genuinely didn't see anything wrong with the arrangement. In his mind, this was just what mothers did, provided indefinitely, asked for nothing in return. "You're just better at keeping house, Mom," he'd say when I asked him to vacuum or do dishes. Or, "Nobody makes lasagna like you do," when I'd suggest he learn to cook. Always a compliment wrapped around the refusal to step up. Always making his helplessness sound like my special talent. His friends were the same, grown men still living with their mothers, still expecting to be taken care of. They'd come over, these 30-year-old boys, and track mud on my clean floor, leave beer cans on the coffee table, talk too loud until too late while I tried to sleep before my early shift. When I'd say something, David would get embarrassed. "Mom, chill out. We're just hanging out." Like I was the unreasonable one for wanting basic respect in my own home that I paid for. There were women sometimes. Girls David would bring home, usually young, usually looking for someone to take care of them, just like he was. They never lasted long. Even they could see what I couldn't, or wouldn't, admit. David wasn't husband material, wasn't even boyfriend material. He was still a child in a man's body, waiting for the world to serve him. "You're too picky," he'd say after another breakup. "You scared her off with all your questions." Like asking a girl what she did for a living or where she saw herself in 5 years was some kind of interrogation. The truth was, these girls saw the red flags I'd been colorblind to for years. They saw a man who expected his mother to still do his laundry, cook his meals, clean his room. They saw their future, and they ran. I wasn't totally naive. Some nights, lying awake with my aching back and throbbing hands, I'd wonder where I went wrong. How I raised a son who saw me as a service, not a person. How I never managed to cut the cord, to push him toward independence. How I'd become an enabler instead of a mother. But by morning, I'd push those thoughts away. Get up, make his breakfast, go to work, come home, make dinner, clean up, fall into bed, rinse and repeat. It was easier that way. Easier to keep the peace. Easier to do it than to fight about it. Easier to ignore the growing resentment building inside me with every sock I picked up, every mess I cleaned, every need I met that wasn't my own. What I didn't know then was that bodies keep score. That years of putting everyone else first eventually catches up with you. That mothers break too, even the strong ones, especially the strong ones. Even after David turned 35, he still lived at home. Still in that same bedroom, though the baseball wallpaper had long since peeled at the corners. Still eating the meals I cooked, still leaving his dirty dishes in the sink, still treating me like his personal maid service. Only difference was, by then, my body had started sending warning signals I couldn't ignore. It began with my hands. After decades at the laundry, my fingers wouldn't straighten anymore. They curled like claws, stiff and painful, especially in the morning or when it rained. "Arthritis," the clinic doctor said. Gave me some pills that made my stomach hurt and didn't help much with the pain. "Occupational hazard," he called it. Like it was just part of the job description. Trade your body for a paycheck, piece by piece. Then my knees went. Started with a grinding feeling when I climbed the stairs, ended with me having to pull myself up by the railing, one step at a time. The doctor called it wear and tear. Said I should consider a desk job. I almost laughed in his face. What desk job hires a 60-something woman with an 8th-grade education and hands like gnarled tree roots? But the real trouble started with my back. One Tuesday morning, I bent down to pick up David's work boots from the middle of the hallway where he'd kicked them off the night before. Something shifted, something tore, and pain shot through my lower back like lightning. I actually screamed. First time pain had ever made me do that. Ended up on the floor, couldn't move for nearly an hour. When David finally found me there, his first question wasn't, "Are you okay?" or "What happened?" No. He looked down at me crumpled on the floor and asked, "Is breakfast ready? I'm running late." That's when I saw it, really saw it for the first time. He didn't see me as a person anymore. Maybe he never had. I was a function to him, not a human being. As long as I could cook and clean and listen to his problems, I mattered. The moment I couldn't serve, I became an inconvenience, an obstacle in his path to getting what he wanted. "I hurt my back," I said, still breathing through waves of pain. "Can't get up." He sighed, actually sighed, and said, "Well, can you tell me where the Pop-Tarts are, at least?" I directed him to the pantry, and he left me there on the floor while he got ready for work. Didn't offer to help me up, didn't call for assistance, didn't even check if I was okay before he left. just stepped around me like I was a piece of furniture that had been moved to an inconvenient spot. After he went to work, I managed to crawl to the phone, call my neighbor Gladys. She was 70 herself, but still spry. Came over and helped me to the couch, brought me some Tylenol, called the clinic. They couldn't get me in for 3 days. 3 days I spent mostly on that couch, getting up only when absolutely necessary. Each movement a lesson in agony. Did David help during those 3 days? Did he step up, maybe cook a meal, run a load of laundry, pick up his own mess for once? Take a wild guess. He complained about the TV dinner I asked him to microwave for himself. Complained that his work shirts weren't ironed. Complained that the house was getting dusty. "When are you going to be better, Mom?" he asked, like my pain was an imposition on him, like my breaking body was some kind of personal betrayal. The clinic sent me for x-rays I couldn't afford. Diagnosis: degenerative disc disease. "Your spine is essentially wearing out," the doctor said. Prescribed physical therapy I couldn't get to and couldn't pay for, and more pills that didn't really work. Said I needed to avoid heavy lifting, prolonged standing, and repetitive bending. In other words, everything my job required. Everything being David's mother required too. I went back to work anyway. What choice did I have? Bills don't pay themselves, and David's contributions to the household finances were sporadic at best. I'd work until I couldn't anymore, then rest just enough to go back and do it again. The pain became my constant companion. I learned to breathe through it, to exist alongside it. Became an expert at hiding winces, at sitting down before my knees gave out, at finding positions that hurt just a little less than others. At home, I started asking David for help more directly. "Could you take out the trash? My back's acting up." Or, "I can't bend down to get the laundry. Can you bring up the basket?" Simple requests, things any decent roommate would do without being asked, let alone a son watching his mother struggle. Sometimes he'd help, with a put-upon sigh or a muttered comment about how he was tired too. More often, he'd say he would, "in a minute," and then conveniently forget. Or he'd do it so poorly, leaving half the trash still in the can, bringing up the laundry but dumping it all on my bed unfolded, that it was almost worse than if he hadn't helped at all. "Mom, do it for me," he'd still say, nearly every day. "Mom, do it for me." When he couldn't find his keys, when dinner wasn't what he wanted, when the Wi-Fi cut out and needed to be reset, always expecting me to drop whatever I was doing, ignore whatever pain I was in, and fix his problems, like I was some kind of service robot with an inexhaustible battery, not a human being with limits, not a body that was falling apart after decades of hard work. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift at the laundry, I came home to find the kitchen a disaster. David had attempted to make himself a sandwich and somehow used every dish we owned in the process. Mayo smeared on the counter, lunch meat left out to spoil, breadcrumbs everywhere. He was in the living room, watching TV, oblivious to the mess he'd left. "David," I said, my back screaming from the 8 hours I'd just spent on my feet. "Could you please clean up the kitchen?" He didn't even look up from his show. "I'll get to it later, Mom. I'm watching this." Something in me snapped. Not my spine, though it felt close. Something deeper. "I'm not asking," I said, my voice strangely calm. "I'm telling you, clean it up. Now." He finally looked at me, surprised by the steel in my voice. Then his face darkened. "What's your problem? It's just a few dishes." "My problem is that I'm 68 years old with a bad back and a grown son who still treats me like his personal servant." He rolled his eyes at me, like I was a nagging girlfriend, not his mother who'd sacrificed everything for him. "Geez, dramatic much? If you didn't want to be a mom, you shouldn't have had me." The cruelty of it took my breath away, as if I'd chosen this particular version of motherhood, as if asking for basic respect was the same as rejecting him entirely, as if the only options were complete self-sacrifice or not being a mother at all. I was too tired to fight, too broken. I turned away, shuffled to my bedroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of my bed and felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Rage. Pure, molten rage. At David, yes, but also at myself. For enabling him. For never demanding respect. For teaching him that my purpose was to serve his needs, no matter the cost to me. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the little moments that had led us here. All the times I'd said yes when I should have said no. All the responsibilities I'd shouldered that should have been his. All the ways I'd failed to teach him to be a man who could take care of himself, let alone care for others. And if you're feeling this story so far, don't forget to subscribe. I've got more real-life stories that'll hit you right in the heart. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My back felt like someone had replaced my spine with broken glass. But I had a doctor's appointment before work. One I'd been putting off for months because I couldn't afford to miss the hours. One I finally made because the pain had gotten so bad I couldn't ignore it anymore. Dr. Patel was new at the clinic, young enough to be my daughter. She had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and hands that were gentle when she examined me. Not like some doctors who poke and prod like you're a piece of meat, not a person who feels pain. "Mrs. Miller," she said after reviewing my x-rays, "I'm concerned about the degeneration in your lumbar spine. How long have you been having severe pain?" I shrugged, winced at the movement. "Year? Maybe 2? Gets worse every month." She frowned. "And you're still working at the industrial laundry? Still lifting heavy loads? Got bills to pay, don't I?" She tapped her pen against her clipboard. "Mrs. Miller, Susan, I need to be direct with you. If you continue this type of work, you're looking at potential paralysis. Your spine simply cannot take the strain anymore." The room seemed to tilt a little. Paralysis? Like not walking? In the worst-case scenario, yes. Best case, you're looking at surgery, possibly multiple surgeries and a long recovery period. But what you absolutely cannot do is continue lifting heavy loads. No more than 5 pounds. That's about the weight of a small bag of flour. 5 pounds. The sheets at work weighed more than that when they were dry, let alone soaking wet. David's laundry basket weighed more than that. The garbage bags, the grocery sacks, the vacuum cleaner, all more than 5 pounds. "Doctor," I said slowly, "what exactly are you telling me?" She met my eyes directly. "I'm telling you that you need to stop working at the laundry immediately. You need to apply for disability, and you need help at home with any lifting or strenuous activity." I almost laughed. Disability, like that was easy to get. Like the government just handed out checks to broken-down laundry workers without a fight. And help at home? The only other person in my home was a 50-year-old child who couldn't even put his own dishes in the sink. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Dr. Patel wasn't fooled. "This isn't optional, Susan. Your body is giving you very clear warnings. Ignore them, and you'll find yourself in the emergency room, possibly unable to walk. Is that what you want?" Of course it wasn't what I wanted, but what I wanted had stopped mattering a long time ago. What mattered was survival, keeping a roof over our heads, keeping the lights on, keeping food on the table. Even now, with David middle-aged and supposedly self-sufficient, I was the one holding everything together. My paycheck, my labor, my breaking body. "I'll figure something out," I said, which wasn't a yes or a no. Dr. Patel sighed, wrote me a prescription for stronger pain medication, and made me promise to come back in 2 weeks. I nodded, knowing I probably wouldn't. Couldn't afford the copay. Couldn't afford the time off work. When I got home that evening, David was waiting. Not out of concern. He hadn't even noticed I'd had a doctor's appointment. He was waiting because the internet was out, and he needed me to call the company. Because at 50, he still claimed he didn't know how to talk to customer service people. I set my purse down, feeling the weight of the new prescription bottles inside. Pills that would blur the edges of the pain, but wouldn't fix the underlying problem. Wouldn't fix anything, really. "David," I said, my voice tired, "I need to talk to you about something important." He was already distracted, scrolling through his phone. "Yeah, in a minute, Mom. Can you call Spectrum first? My show's about to start." "No," I said, surprising both of us. "This can't wait. The internet can." He looked up, irritated. "What's so important?" I took a deep breath. "I saw the doctor today. About my back. She says I can't work at the laundry anymore, can't lift more than 5 pounds, or I might end up unable to walk." For a moment, concern flashed across his face, a glimpse of the little boy who once brought me dandelions from the yard. Then his brow furrowed. "So what? You're quitting your job? How are we going to pay the bills?" Not, "Are you okay, Mom?" Not, "That's scary. What can I do to help?" Just straight to how my medical crisis would inconvenience him. "The doctor says I should apply for disability," I said. "But that takes time to get approved, if it even does. In the meantime, I need your help, real help, with housework, with expenses. I can't do it all anymore, David." He scoffed. Actually scoffed, like I'd suggested something ridiculous. "Mom, you know I'm barely making ends meet at my job. I can't take on more bills." His job was part-time at the auto parts store, 25 hours a week maximum. He spent more time playing video games than working. Meanwhile, I was still pulling 40-plus hours at the laundry at 68 years old with a deteriorating spine. "Then you need to find a better job," I said, surprising myself again with my directness. "Or a second job. I physically cannot keep working like this. The doctor says—" "Doctors say a lot of things," he interrupted. "They're just covering their asses. You're tough, Mom. You'll be fine." The casual dismissal of my health, of my pain, felt like a slap. This was the son I'd raised, the son I'd sacrificed everything for, the son who couldn't be bothered to care that his mother's body was literally breaking down from decades of hard work. "I'm not fine," I said quietly. "I haven't been fine for a long time, and I can't keep pretending I am." He shrugged. "So take some time off. Rest up. But don't expect me to suddenly start paying all the bills. That's not fair." Fair. As if anything about our arrangement had ever been fair. As if it was fair that I still worked full-time while he contributed barely enough to cover the internet he complained about. As if it was fair that I came home from work in agony to cook his dinner while he sat on the couch playing video games. As if it was fair that at his age I had already been raising him alone for over 15 years. "Life isn't fair, David," I said, bone-tired, "but this can't continue. I'm telling you now, I am going to have to stop working soon. The doctor says my back can't take it anymore, so you need to step up, find more work, help around the house, be an adult." He looked at me like I'd suggested he sprout wings and fly. "Jesus, Mom, where is this coming from? You've never talked like this before." And he was right. I hadn't. I'd spent decades swallowing my needs, my pain, my resentment, putting him first, always him first, until my body had finally said, "Enough." "Things change," I said simply. "My back is giving out. I can't do what I used to do. That's the reality we're facing." He stood up, suddenly angry. "So what? You're just gonna quit? Leave me to figure everything out? Real nice, Mom. Real nice." The unfairness of it stole my breath. How had I raised a son who could twist my medical crisis into a betrayal of him? Who could hear, "I might end up paralyzed," and think only of how it affected his internet access? "I'm not quitting on you," I said, my voice shaking now. "I'm telling you I'm physically unable to keep carrying everything. I need your help." "Whatever," he said, grabbing his keys from the counter. "I'm going out. Call Spectrum while I'm gone, would you?" And he left. Just like that. Left me standing in our kitchen, prescription bottles in my purse, doctor's warnings echoing in my ears, and his demand still hanging in the air. Call Spectrum. Fix his problem. Ignore my own. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence of the house, feeling the familiar pain radiating from my back, down my legs, up into my shoulders. Pain I'd learned to live with, to work through, to pretend wasn't slowly destroying me. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a different life. A life where I put myself first. A life where I didn't run myself into the ground for a son who couldn't see me as a person with needs of my own. A life where no was a complete sentence, not the opening of a negotiation. It was a terrifying thought, and also, suddenly, a liberating one. I didn't quit my job right away, couldn't afford to. Instead, I talked to Mike, my supervisor, about moving to the folding station. Less lifting, more standing in one place. Not great for my back either, but better than hauling wet sheets from washers to dryers. He did what he could, but the truth is, there's no easy job in an industrial laundry. Everything hurts something. David avoided me for 3 days after our fight. Came home late, left early, barely spoke. Fine by me. I was too tired to argue, too focused on just getting through each day without my legs giving out. The new pain meds helped some, but they made me fuzzy, slow. Not great when you're operating industrial machinery. I started taking half doses just to stay alert enough for work. On the 4th day, David finally broke the silence. Not with an apology, of course. Not with any acknowledgement of how he'd dismissed my health concerns. No, he broke the silence by asking me to co-sign for a new car loan. My Chevy's on its last legs, he said, shoving a loan application across the kitchen table at me. Dealership says with your name on it we can get a better rate. I stared at the paper, then at him. You want me to take on more debt when I just told you I might have to stop working soon? He rolled his eyes. It's just a co-sign, Mom. I'll make the payments. But your credit score is better than mine. My credit score was better because I paid my bills on time, even when it meant going without other things. Even when it meant working through pain that would have sent most people to the emergency room. Even when it meant never buying anything for myself that wasn't absolutely necessary. No, I said, pushing the paper back toward him. He blinked, genuinely surprised. What do you mean, no? I mean, no. I'm not co-signing a loan I might get stuck paying if you decide the payments are too much for your budget. His face darkened. Seriously? After all I do around here? I almost laughed. Almost. What exactly do you do around here, David? You pay less than half the bills. You don't cook, you don't clean, you don't even take out your own trash most days. That's not fair. No, I cut him off. What's not fair is expecting your aging mother to keep carrying you at 50 years old. What's not fair is dismissing my health problems because they inconvenience you. What's not fair is asking me to take on more financial risk when I just told you I might lose my income soon. He stood up so fast his chair fell backward, crashing against the linoleum floor. You know what? Forget it. I don't need your help. I'll figure it out myself. Good, I said quietly. That's exactly what you should do. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard the little ceramic bird collection on my shelf rattled. Figurines my mother had given me, piece by piece, on birthdays and Christmases. One of the few nice things I owned. I got up, slowly, painfully, to make sure none had fallen. They were all still there, but the blue jay had a new chip on its wing. That night, getting ready for bed, I couldn't find my pain pills. Searched my purse, the bathroom cabinet, my bedside drawer. Nothing. I distinctly remembered putting them in my purse after work. Had I dropped them somewhere? Left them at work? My back was throbbing, sharp pains shooting down my right leg with every step. I needed those pills. Then a cold realization hit me. David, who'd been caught stealing prescription drugs from a coworker last year. David, who'd sworn he was just experimenting, and it wasn't a big deal. David, who'd promised never to do it again when I'd threatened to kick him out. I went to his room, knocked once, then opened the door. He was sitting on his bed, scrolling through his phone. Ever heard of privacy? He snapped. Where are my pills, David? His face gave it away, that flash of guilt before the defensive anger. What are you talking about? My pain medication, the prescription I just got. Where is it? How should I know? Maybe you left it at work. I stepped further into the room, wincing as my back protested the movement. Don't lie to me. Those pills aren't recreational. They're for severe pain. My pain. Get out of my room, he said, standing up. I don't have your stupid pills. But his eyes darted to his dresser for just a second. Just long enough. I moved toward it, each step sending fire up my spine. Don't, he said. But it wasn't a denial anymore. It was a warning. I opened the top drawer. There, under a tangle of socks, was my prescription bottle. Half empty already. I'd only taken 2 pills. You stole my medication, I said, holding up the bottle. Medication I need to function, to work, to do all the things you rely on me to do. It's not a big deal, he muttered. You can get more. Not for another 3 weeks. This was supposed to last a month. He shrugged, looking away. So go back to the doctor. Tell them you lost it. And say what? That my 50-year-old son is stealing my pain medication? That he cares so little about my suffering that he'd take the only thing helping me get through the day? You're overreacting, he said, but he still wouldn't meet my eyes. I clutched the half-empty bottle, my hands shaking, not just from pain now, but from a rage so pure it scared me. This was my son, my child, the person I'd given everything for, and he was stealing the medication that made my broken body bearable because… Why? For fun? To sell? Did it even matter why? Get out, I said, my voice low. Now he looked at me. What? Get out of my house, he scoffed. You're kicking me out over some pills? Come on, Mom, don't be… This isn't about the pills, I cut him off. This is about 50 years of taking and never giving back. This is about you seeing me in pain every day and not only not helping, but actually making it worse. This is about me finally realizing that I've created a monster by never saying no to you. He stepped toward me, towering over my small frame. You don't mean that. You're just upset. You'll calm down. No, I said, standing my ground despite the pain. I won't calm down. Not this time. I want you out by the end of the week. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. The fear of someone who suddenly realizes the safety net they've taken for granted might actually disappear. Where am I supposed to go? He asked, his voice smaller now. That's not my problem anymore, I said, turning to leave his room. Figure it out yourself. You're 50 years old. It's long past time. I made it back to my room before the tears came. Not sad tears, relief tears. Like something tight around my chest had finally loosened. I took one of the remaining pills, knowing I'd have to ration them carefully now. As the medication slowly dulled the edges of my pain, I lay in bed thinking about what I'd just done, wondering if I'd have the strength to follow through. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee brewing. Strange, since I was always the one who made coffee. Always the first one up, no matter how badly I'd slept, no matter how much pain I was in. I shuffled to the kitchen to find David there, pouring a cup. He'd even set out my favorite mug, the one with cardinals on it, that my friend Juanita had given me for Christmas years ago. Morning, Mom, he said, too cheerfully. Made you coffee. I took the mug warily. Thank you. Look, he said, leaning against the counter. About last night. I was out of line. I shouldn't have taken your pills. It won't happen again. I sipped the coffee. It was too weak, but the gesture itself was so foreign I almost didn't mind. And? I prompted. He shifted uncomfortably. And I'm sorry. Really sorry. In the past, this would have been enough. A half-hearted apology, a small gesture, and all would be forgiven. Back to the status quo. Back to me sacrificing and him taking. But something had changed in me. Maybe it was the doctor's warning about paralysis. Maybe it was finding my medication in his drawer. Or maybe it was just the culmination of decades of being used up, worn down, taken for granted. I appreciate the apology, I said carefully. But what I said last night stands. I need you to find your own place. The friendly mask slipped. Seriously? After I apologized? After I made you coffee? I set the mug down. David, 1 cup of coffee doesn't erase 50 years of behavior. And an apology doesn't fix the fact that you stole medication I need for a serious medical condition. This isn't a negotiation. I need you out by Sunday. Sunday? David's voice rose, indignant. That's 4 days from now. Where am I supposed to find a place that fast? I took another sip of the weak coffee, buying time. Truth was, I didn't care where he went. For the first time in 5 decades, I was putting myself first. My health, my sanity, my need for peace in what might be my final years. You could try Mark, I suggested. Mark was his friend from the auto parts store, divorced twice, lived in a 2-bedroom apartment across town. Or get a hotel until you find something permanent. A hotel? Do you know how expensive hotels are? I almost laughed. Did I know how expensive things were? Me, who'd stretched every paycheck to the breaking point my entire adult life? Me, who'd never had a vacation, never owned a new car, never bought clothes that weren't on clearance? Figure it out, David, I said, echoing his own dismissive words back to him. That's what adults do. He stormed around the kitchen, opening cabinets and slamming them shut. Looking for what, I had no idea, just making noise, taking up space, making sure I felt his anger. This is bullshit, he muttered. Total bullshit. 1 mistake, and you're throwing me out on the street. 1 mistake? Now I did laugh, a harsh sound that hurt my throat. David, you've been making the same mistake for 50 years, thinking the world revolves around you, thinking your mother exists to serve your needs, taking and never giving back. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, I cut him off. You said it yourself the other day. Well, this is me finally agreeing with you. Life isn't fair. I've given you everything I have, my youth, my health, my entire life, and you've given me nothing but demands and complaints in return. So yes, I'm asking you to leave, because I have nothing left to give. He stopped his theatrical cabinet slamming to stare at me. You don't mean that. You're just upset about the pills. I said I was sorry. I'm not upset about the pills, I said quietly. I'm upset about the fact that you saw me in pain, knew I needed that medication, and took it anyway. I'm upset that even now, you're making this about you and your inconvenience, not about the fact that your actions hurt me. That's why you need to leave, David, because after 50 years, you still don't see me as a person. Something shifted in his face then, a flicker of understanding maybe, or just a realization that his usual tactics, the defensiveness, the guilt trips, the empty promises, weren't working this time. That I meant what I said. Fine, he spat. I'll call Mark, but I'll need money for the deposit if I get my own place. Of course he would ask for money even now. Even as I was finally setting a boundary, he was looking for ways to extract one last thing from me. No, I said simply. No? He looked genuinely shocked. Mom, I can't just... I said no. I've supported you financially your entire life. That ends now. You have a job. You have savings, or should have, given how little you've contributed to this household. Use that. His face contorted with a rage I recognized all too well. The rage of a spoiled child denied a toy. The rage of a man who had never heard the word no stick. You know what? He shouted. Keep your money. Keep this whole goddamn house. I don't need your help. I never needed your help. The lie was so absurd I didn't even bother responding. Never needed my help? He couldn't even make a phone call to Spectrum without my intervention. Couldn't cook a meal more complex than a sandwich. Couldn't manage his own laundry or cleaning or basic adult responsibilities. He grabbed his keys from the counter. I'll be gone by Sunday. And don't expect me to come crawling back when you realize you can't manage on your own. The irony was almost too much. He thought I couldn't manage without him? He, who had been a burden rather than a help for decades? Goodbye, David, I said, turning away from him. I heard him stomp to the door, heard it slam behind him, heard his car start up, the engine revving too hard before he screeched away from the curb. And then, silence. Beautiful, profound silence. I sat at my kitchen table, drinking the 2-week coffee he'd made, and felt something unfamiliar spread through my chest. It took me a moment to recognize it. Peace. For the first time in 50 years, I was alone in my own home. No demands, no complaints, no one to serve but myself. The next few days passed in a blur. David came and went, packing his things in sullen silence. I stayed out of his way, worked my shifts at the laundry, came home, and savored the growing emptiness of the house. With each box he removed, each drawer he emptied, I felt lighter, like I was reclaiming space, physical and emotional, that had been occupied for too long. On Sunday morning, he made his final trip, loaded the last of his belongings into his car and a borrowed pickup truck from Mark. He didn't say goodbye, just left his house key on the counter and walked out, closing the door with unusual gentleness. As if, even in this final act, he couldn't give me the satisfaction of a clean break. I waited until I heard both vehicles drive away. Then I walked slowly through the house, taking inventory of what remained. The walls were bare where his posters had hung. The living room looked bigger without his recliner and gaming console. His bedroom, soon to be just a spare room, was stripped down to the mattress and empty dresser. 50 years of motherhood, and all I had to show for it was an empty room and a quieter house. No warm relationship, no fond memories to sustain me. No son who cared if I lived or died as long as his needs were met. He didn't just have one son, he had 2, maybe more. If you want to hear more stories like this, go ahead and subscribe now. I sat on the edge of his bare mattress and allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. I had evicted my only child, pushed away the person I'd centered my entire life around, cut the cord that had bound us together, however dysfunctionally. Conventional wisdom says a mother should feel devastated by such a break, should be racked with guilt and grief, should be questioning her decision, wondering if she'd done the right thing. But all I felt was relief, deep, bone-settling relief, like putting down a heavy load I'd been carrying for far too long. That evening, I soaked in a hot bath, something I rarely did when David was home. He always used up all the hot water, always complained if I took too long in the bathroom. I added Epsom salts for my aching muscles and lay there until the water cooled, thinking about what came next. I still had my job for now, still had bills to pay, still had a body that was breaking down a little more each day. But I also had something new, agency, the freedom to make decisions based on my needs, not someone else's, the space to figure out what I actually wanted from whatever time I had left. For the first time in decades, I went to bed that night without checking on anyone else, without picking up someone else's dirty socks or dirty dishes, without listening to someone else's problems or complaints. Just me, my pillow, and the blessed silence of an empty house. I slept better than I had in years. The first week without David was strange. I kept expecting to hear his heavy footsteps, his complaints, the constant background noise of his existence. Kept automatically cooking too much food, setting 2 places at the table before catching myself. Kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to show up at the door, broke and desperate, expecting to be taken back in. He didn't come. Not that first week. Not the second. I heard from Mark that David had moved in with him temporarily, was looking for his own apartment, was telling everyone who would listen that I'd lost my mind and thrown him out for no reason, that I was getting senile and couldn't take care of myself anymore. Let him talk. The neighbors who'd watched me trudge to the bus stop at 4:30 every morning for decades, who'd seen David come and go at all hours without ever holding down a steady job, knew the truth. And the ones who believed him? Well, they didn't matter much to me anyway. What did matter was figuring out what came next. Dr. Patel hadn't been exaggerating. My back was getting worse, not better. Even with the reduced lifting at the folding station, every shift left me in agony. The medication helped, but not enough, and I was running out faster than I should have, thanks to David's theft. 2 weeks after David left, I had a follow-up appointment with Dr. Patel. She took one look at me struggling to get onto the examination table and shook her head. "You're still working, aren't you?" she said, not really a question. I nodded. "Can't afford not to," she sighed, checked my reflexes, had me bend as much as I could, and stretch, asked about pain levels, sleep quality, whether I could manage basic self-care tasks. My answers clearly troubled her. "Susan," she said finally, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your spine is deteriorating rapidly. The disc degeneration we saw on your last x-rays is progressing. If you continue working, especially in a physically demanding job, you are looking at permanent nerve damage, possibly paralysis. This isn't a maybe scenario, it's a when scenario." I swallowed hard. "How long do I have before it gets that bad?" She spread her hands. "Impossible to say exactly. Could be 6 months, could be 6 weeks. Depends on how much stress you put on your body, but what I can tell you with certainty is that you need to stop working immediately. File for disability. Look into Medicare if you're not already enrolled. Find help for household tasks." "I just got rid of my help," I said with a bitter laugh, telling her about David's departure. To her credit, Dr. Patel didn't judge, just nodded and made notes in my file. "That sounds like it was a difficult but necessary step. But now you need to focus on your health, on building a support system that actually supports you." Support system. The word sounded foreign. I'd never had one of those. Had always been the support system for others. "I don't know where to start," I admitted. Dr. Patel surprised me then. Instead of just handing me some pamphlets or referrals, she actually sat down on her little stool and spent time helping me make a plan. Called in a social worker who happened to be at the clinic that day. Between the three of us, we mapped out a strategy. Step 1. File for disability immediately. The social worker, a no-nonsense woman named Shanice, warned me it would likely be denied the first time. They deny everyone the first time, just on principle, but that I shouldn't give up. Step 2. Talk to my supervisor at the laundry about medical leave under the Family and Medical Leave Act. It wouldn't pay much, but it would protect my job while I sorted out disability. Step 3. Look into community resources. Meals on Wheels for days when cooking was too painful. The Senior Center's transportation program for getting to medical appointments. The church down the street that had a volunteer program for helping elderly residents with household chores. Elderly. That word stuck in my craw. I was only 68, didn't feel elderly in my mind, even if my body disagreed. But I swallowed my pride and took the pamphlets, the phone numbers, the referrals. Promised to follow up, to at least make the calls. That night, sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by paperwork, I felt overwhelmed. How had I gone from the family provider, the strong one, to someone who needed to call a church to ask for help taking out the garbage? How had decades of hard work led to this, a broken body and a stack of forms to beg for assistance? For a moment, just a moment, I considered calling David, asking him to come back, to help navigate this new landscape of need. But then I remembered how he'd stolen my medication, how he'd dismissed my pain, how he'd made every problem about himself, even as I was breaking down right in front of him. No, I'd find another way. The next day, I called Mike at the laundry, told him I needed medical leave. He wasn't surprised, had seen me wincing, moving slower, taking more breaks, said he'd get the paperwork started, said my job would be there when I could come back. We both knew I probably wouldn't be back. 54 years at the same place, ended not with a retirement party or a gold watch, but with medical leave paperwork and disability forms. Not exactly how I'd imagined my career would end. After calling Mike, I made myself tackle the disability application. Online, because I couldn't manage the bus trip downtown to the Social Security office. 3 hours of answering questions, scanning documents, trying to make my case that yes, I was truly unable to work, that this wasn't a choice or a preference, but a medical necessity, that my body had finally given out after decades of service. When I hit submit on the application, I felt nothing. No relief, no accomplishment, just a dull awareness that I'd just officially labeled myself as broken, as less than, as someone who needed help rather than someone who gave it. The silence of the house pressed in on me. For 50 years, I'd been defined by motherhood, by work, by service to others. Who was I now? Just an old woman with a bad back and an uncertain future. That night, I didn't sleep. Lay awake, listening to the house settle, to the occasional car passing outside, wondering what would happen if disability was denied, if my savings ran out before approval came through, if my back gave out completely and I couldn't even get out of bed. Who would know? Who would check on me? Who would care? The next morning, moving stiffly after the sleepless night, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Watched the sun rise through the small window over the sink. Thought about all the mornings I'd stood at that sink, rushing to pack lunches, wash dishes, get out the door to catch the bus to work. Always rushing, always for someone else. The doorbell rang, startling me. I wasn't expecting anyone, hadn't ordered anything. Carefully, painfully, I made my way to the door and peered through the peephole. Gladys from next door stood on my porch, holding a casserole dish. I opened the door, confused. "Heard you're on medical leave," she said without preamble. "Figured you could use some dinner." I blinked, surprised. Gladys and I had been neighbors for 30 years, but we weren't close. Occasional chats over the fence, borrowing a cup of sugar, keeping an eye on each other's houses during vacations, hers, not mine. I never took vacations. But not casserole bringing close, or so I'd thought. "That's very kind," I said, accepting the dish. It was still warm, smelled like chicken and herbs. Gladys shrugged. "Not kind, neighborly, you'd do the same." She peered at me with shrewd eyes. "You need anything else? Groceries? Prescription pickup? Don't be proud, Susan. We all need help sometimes." We all need help sometimes. Such simple words. Such a difficult concept for someone who'd been self-reliant her entire life. "I'm okay for now," I said. "But thank you. Really." She nodded, turned to go, then paused. "Book club meets at my place Thursday nights. Nothing fancy. Just some old broads like us talking about whatever we're reading, or not reading." She smiled slightly. "You should come. Get out of the house." Before I could respond, she was heading back to her own porch, waving over her shoulder. 7 o'clock. Bring wine if you want, but not necessary." I stood in the doorway long after she'd gone, holding the warm casserole dish, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in my chest. Something that felt dangerously like hope. I didn't go to Gladys's book club that first Thursday. My back was particularly bad that day, and the thought of sitting in an unfamiliar chair for hours made me wince. But the following week, I dragged myself over there, clutching a bottle of cheap wine and feeling ridiculous. Like a teenager at her first party, nervous and out of place. Gladys's living room was crowded with women about my age. Some I recognized from the neighborhood, others I'd never seen before. They'd arranged chairs and couch space in a rough circle, and there was a coffee table laden with cheese and crackers, store-bought cookies, and several other bottles of wine. "Susan!" Gladys called when she saw me hovering in the doorway. Come in, come in. Everyone, this is Susan from next door. Susan, this is everyone." There was a chorus of hellos, and someone, a plump woman with silver hair and bright red lipstick, patted the couch cushion next to her. "Plenty of room here, honey. And this couch is good for bad backs, nice and firm." I sat carefully, trying not to grimace. The woman was right. The couch was better than most for my spine. She introduced herself as Marlene, a retired nurse who lived 3 blocks over. "Gladys says you worked at the industrial laundry," she said. "Girl, that's harder work than most men ever do in their lives. No wonder your back's shot." There was something validating about her matter-of-fact acknowledgement. Not pity, not dismissal, just recognition of reality. I found myself relaxing a fraction. The book that month was some mystery novel I hadn't read, but it didn't seem to matter. The discussion meandered from the plot to the characters, to the women's own lives, to politics, to complaints about adult children and grandchildren, to recipes and health tips and neighborhood gossip. No one seemed to mind that I didn't contribute much. Just being there, listening, occasionally nodding or smiling, seemed enough. By the end of the evening, I'd learned that Marlene had been widowed twice. First one died, second one I threw out, so I count them both as departed. That the tiny woman named Ruth had been a civil rights activist in the 60s, that Gladys had secretly always wanted to be a lounge singer, and that every woman in that room had some kind of chronic pain or health issue they were managing. Bodies wear out, said Frances, a former elementary school teacher with gnarled hands from rheumatoid arthritis. Especially women's bodies. We use them hard, and no one ever tells us to slow down. Ain't that the truth? Marlene agreed. Men get a hangnail, the whole world stops. We get chronic pain, and it's take an aspirin and keep going, honey. I found myself nodding, feeling a strange sense of community with these women I barely knew. They understood something fundamental about my life without me having to explain it. The constant pushing through pain, the expectation of endless service, the invisibility of aging women. As I was leaving, Gladys pressed a business card into my hand. My nephew, she explained. He's a handyman. Good kid, does work for most of us at a decent price. You got stuff that needs fixing around your house, call him. He won't rip you off 'cause he knows I'll tan his hide if he does. I took the card, touched by the gesture. Thanks, Gladys, for this and for inviting me tonight. It was nice. She waved off my thanks. Come back next week. We're doing potluck, not books. Bring whatever's easy. No one here's judging. I walked the short distance back to my house slowly, mindful of the uneven sidewalk in the dark. The night air was cool but not cold, smelling of someone's charcoal grill and late-blooming flowers. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about my back pain or disability paperwork or how I was going to make ends meet. I was just present, in the moment. Aware of the slight breeze, the distant sound of traffic, the weight of Gladys's nephew's business card in my pocket. The house seemed emptier than usual when I returned. Not in a sad way, but in a way that highlighted possibilities. Without David's constant presence, his possessions, his needs filling every corner, the space was becoming mine again. I could redecorate if I wanted, move furniture, paint walls, make choices based solely on my preferences. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. After 5 decades of considering someone else's needs first, the freedom to choose for myself felt almost overwhelming. What did I even like? What colors appealed to me? What would make this house feel like my home, not just the place where I'd raised a son who no longer lived here? I didn't have answers that night, but for the first time, I was asking the questions. The next week brought news about my disability application. Denied, just as Shanice had predicted. Appeal immediately, she advised when I called to tell her. And get your doctor to write a stronger letter. Be explicit about exactly what you can't do. No sugarcoating. I followed her advice, spending another tedious afternoon filling out appeal forms online. Dr. Patel came through with a letter that left no room for misinterpretation about the state of my spine and the risks of continued work. Patient cannot lift more than 5 pounds, cannot stand for more than 30 minutes at a time, cannot bend or twist without severe pain, cannot sit without support for more than 45 minutes, she wrote, making me sound completely helpless. The worst part was, she wasn't exaggerating much. My body was betraying me more each day, regardless of how carefully I moved or how religiously I took my medication. Simple tasks, washing dishes, making the bed, carrying in groceries, had become complex exercises in pain management. I'd developed a mental map of my house based on places I could sit or lean if the pain suddenly spiked. Had started keeping a phone in my pocket at all times in case I fell and couldn't get up. This was my life now. Not what I'd planned, not what I'd worked for, but what I had. Instead of dwelling on it, I called Gladys's nephew about fixing my leaky kitchen faucet. He came the next day, a burly man in his 40s with his aunt's no-nonsense demeanor. Fixed the faucet, replaced a broken porch step I'd been carefully stepping over for months, and charged me half what I expected. When he noticed me wincing as I wrote him a check, he asked quietly if I needed help with anything else around the house. "I'm okay," I said automatically, the response so ingrained I didn't even think about it. He gave me a look remarkably like his aunt's. My mom was the same way. Never asked for help till she couldn't get out of bed anymore. "Don't wait that long, Ms. Miller. I got a clear schedule Thursdays." After he left, I sat at my kitchen table with its newly non-dripping faucet and thought about what he'd said. About waiting too long. About the stubborn pride that kept me from accepting help until crisis hit. About the difference between being independent and being isolated. That evening, I made a list. Things I could still do without pain. Things I could do, but with difficulty. Things I simply couldn't do anymore without risk. The last category was longer than I wanted to admit. Then I made a second list. People who might help. It was shockingly short. Gladys, her nephew, Dr. Patel, Shanice the social worker. The women from book club maybe, though I barely knew them. Not David, not any other family. They were all gone now. Not friends from work. We'd been friendly, but never spent time together outside the laundry. The brevity of the list should have depressed me. Instead, it clarified something. My world had become too small. Centered entirely around work and David, I'd let other connections wither. Had turned down invitations, missed neighborhood gatherings, avoided church socials, always too tired, too busy, too focused on just getting through each day. If I was going to survive this new chapter, disabled, aging, alone, I needed to expand my world, not contract it further. Needed to let people in, even if that meant being vulnerable, even if that meant admitting I couldn't do everything myself anymore. The next day I called Gladys's nephew and asked if his Thursday offer still stood. Asked if he could help me install a grab bar in my shower, a task that had been on my mental list for months, but that I knew would be beyond my physical capabilities now. "Be there at 10, he said simply. That small act, asking for help with a specific task, felt like a seismic shift. A crack in the wall of self-reliance I'd built over decades. A first step toward a different way of being in the world. I didn't know yet where that step would lead. Didn't know if my disability appeal would be approved, if my savings would last, if my back would continue to deteriorate at the same alarming pace. But for the first time, I wasn't facing those questions entirely alone. Had people, not many, but some, I could potentially turn to. Could ask for help without it feeling like complete surrender. It wasn't much, wasn't a Hollywood happy ending. But it was something. A small light in what had been looking like an increasingly dark tunnel. A possible path forward that didn't require me to be Superwoman anymore. That night, I went back to Gladys's for potluck. Brought a store-bought pie because baking was now on my can't-do list. No one cared. They saved me a spot on the good couch, filled my plate when I got there, included me in their conversations as if I'd been part of the group for years. "You came back," Gladys said as I was leaving, sounding mildly surprised. "I did," I agreed. "You gonna keep coming back?" I thought about it. About my empty house, about my too small world, about the surprising comfort of being among women who understood aging and pain and starting over. "Yes," I said finally. "I think I am. It's been almost a year since I kicked my son out of my house. Almost a year of living alone for the first time in my entire life. Almost a year of learning who Susan Miller is when she's not defined by being somebody's mother or somebody's employee. Turns out I'm still figuring that out. Maybe I always will be." My disability was finally approved on the third try, 8 months after my initial application. The back pay helped clear some of the medical bills that had piled up, but the monthly checks are barely enough to live on. I supplement with what little savings I had and the small pension from the laundry. It's tight, real tight some months, but I make it work. Always have. My back didn't get better. Dr. Patel says it never will. The damage is permanent. Decades of hard labor don't just reverse themselves because you finally stop. On good days, I can move around the house without too much pain, maybe even walk to the end of the block and back. On bad days, I don't get out of bed except to use the bathroom. I've learned to work with what each day gives me, not fight against it. Fighting just makes the pain worse. The grab bar in my shower led to other modifications around the house. Gladys's nephew, Jim's his name, though I still think of him as Gladys's nephew most days, installed a railing along the hallway, put in one of those raised toilet seats that makes it easier to get up and down, rearranged my kitchen so the things I use most are at counter height. Small changes that make a big difference in my daily life. I pay him when I can. Other times, I watch his kids after school when his wife's working late. They're good kids, 10 and 12, do their homework at my kitchen table and tell me about their days. The sound of young voices in the house again is nice, especially knowing they'll go home after a few hours. No permanent responsibility, just temporary connection. I've become a regular at Gladys's Thursday gatherings. Sometimes it's books, sometimes just potluck and gossip. I don't always talk much, but I'm always welcome. The women there have become something I never expected to have at this stage of my life. Friends, real ones, the kind who check on you when you miss a meeting, who bring soup when you're sick, who understand when you can't make it because your back is acting up. Marlene, the retired nurse, has been especially helpful. Showed me exercises that sometimes ease the pain, recommended a better pillow for sleeping, goes with me to doctor appointments when they might involve complicated information or decisions. Says it's just professional interest, but I know better. It's kindness, plain and simple, the kind I'm still learning to accept without feeling like I owe something in return. Ruth, the tiny former activist, got me involved with a senior advocacy group that meets at the community center once a month. They fight for better healthcare access, affordable housing, transportation options for seniors who can't drive. Small battles in a system stacked against aging bodies, but meaningful ones. I help stuff envelopes when my hands cooperate, make phone calls to remind people about meetings, take notes during sessions. Nothing physically demanding, but it makes me feel useful, part of something larger than my own problems. David still hasn't spoken to me, not directly. I hear about him occasionally through neighborhood gossip. He found his own apartment eventually, has a new girlfriend, still works at the auto parts store, though he's management now. Part of me hopes he's finally growing up, learning to stand on his own. Another part knows it's more likely he's found someone new to take care of him, to do for him what I did for 50 years. I don't miss him. That's the hardest truth to admit, even to myself. I don't miss the constant demands, the ingratitude, the feeling that no matter how much I gave, it was never enough. I miss who I thought he would become when he was small. Miss the potential I saw in that little boy with the big brown eyes. But the man he grew into? No. I don't miss him at all. Sometimes I wonder if that makes me a bad mother. If real maternal love is supposed to be unconditional, endless, able to withstand any amount of taking without resentment, if the fact that I finally reached my limit means I failed at the one job society tells women we're born to do. But then I think about what that kind of love cost me, my health, my happiness. Decades of putting someone else's needs before my own, to the point where I didn't even know what my own needs were anymore. To the point where my body literally broke down from the strain of constant giving. That can't be right. Can't be what motherhood is supposed to be. A slow suicide of self for someone who doesn't even notice the sacrifice. There has to be a balance, a way to love without disappearing completely. I never found that balance with David, but maybe that's okay. Maybe it's enough that I finally found my own voice, my own boundaries, even if it took 68 years to do it. Last month, I started painting. Nothing fancy, just watercolors on cheap paper from the dollar store. Frances from book club teaches art at the senior center on Tuesdays, and she convinced me to try. Worst case scenario, you hate it and never come back, she said. Best case, you discover something new about yourself. My first attempts were terrible. Wobbly trees, lopsided flowers, colors bleeding into each other in ways I didn't intend. But there was something soothing about the process. The focus required to hold the brush with my arthritic hands. The way the colors spread across the damp paper, unpredictable but beautiful in their randomness. The simple fact of creating something that hadn't existed before. I've gotten a little better with practice. Not good, but better. Francis says I have an interesting perspective. Pretty sure that's art teacher code for still terrible but trying. But I don't mind. I'm not aiming for gallery shows, just for the quiet joy of putting brush to paper and seeing what happens. My latest painting, a sunrise over Lake Erie, is hanging on my fridge now. First thing I've put there that wasn't a bill or a reminder note in years. It makes me smile when I see it, not because it's particularly good, but because it's entirely mine. No one told me to paint it. No one judged it, or critiqued it, or demanded I do it differently. It's just mine. A small expression of the person I'm becoming in this late chapter of my life. The house is different now. I've rearranged furniture to make it easier to navigate with my bad back. Painted the living room a soft blue instead of the beige it's been since we moved in 40 years ago. Put up curtains I actually like instead of the practical dirt-hiding browns I chose when David was small. Small changes that make this space feel like mine, not just the place where I raised a child who no longer speaks to me. I still have bad days, days when the pain is overwhelming, when loneliness hits hard, when I worry about the future and how I'll manage as my body continues to betray me. Days when I wonder if I made the right choice, cutting ties with my only child. Days when I'm angry, at David, at his father for leaving, at a system that used up my body and then discarded me when I broke, at myself for not setting boundaries decades earlier. But I have good days too. Days when the pain is manageable. When I sit with Gladys on her porch drinking iced tea and watching the neighborhood kids play. When I finish a painting I'm not completely embarrassed by. When I look around my quiet, peaceful house and feel contentment instead of emptiness. I survived the lie. And I found peace. If this story touched you, hit subscribe. Let's keep these real voices alive. What I've learned in this year of living alone is that it's never too late to start over. Never too late to draw a line and say, no more. Never too late to discover who you are beyond the roles that defined you for decades. It's not easy. There are no magical transformations, no sudden lifting of burdens. Just small steps forward, small moments of joy, small discoveries about yourself that accumulate over time into something like wisdom. I don't know how much time I have left. My body reminds me daily of its fragility, its finitude. But whatever time remains is mine now. Mine to spend as I choose, with people who see me as a complete person, not just a function or a resource. Mine to fill with small pleasures, a good book, a new painting, a conversation with a friend, the simple satisfaction of a home that reflects my taste, not anyone else's. It's not the life I planned, not the life I worked for all those years at the laundry. Certainly not the life I imagined when I held my newborn son 50 years ago, full of hopes for both our futures. But it's the life I have, and for the first time and as long as I can remember, it feels like it truly belongs to me.